The room went dead silent the moment the twins walked in. Two identical faces, two sets of cold black eyes, and one woman trapped between them who had no idea she was already theirs. Zuri Cole thought she was just closing a late shift at the Hanam bar when the door opened, and everything she knew about safe stopped being true. Something cracked open in both of them at the same time, like a fault line, and the woman standing in the middle of it had no idea she was the earthquake. Welcome to Afro-Korean Tales TV, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. Zuri Cole had exactly 3 rules for surviving in Seoul. Don't make eye contact with men who wore suits too clean for the weather. Don't stay at the bar past midnight. And never, ever let anyone see you cry. She'd been following those rules for 4 months. 4 months of quiet shifts at Munbi's bar in Hanam, a place that smelled like soju and old wood, and the kind of loneliness that settled into your bones if you let it. She'd come to Seoul with $600, a backpack, and a broken heart she refused to talk about. Now she poured drinks, collected tips, and told herself every night that this was temporary, that something better was coming. It hadn't come yet, but tonight everything was about to change. The rain started around 10 p.m., the kind that Seoul threw down without warning, sheets of cold water that turned the streets into rivers in seconds. Zuri was wiping down the bar when the door opened. Not one man, 2. They entered the way storms entered a room, filling every inch of space without making a sound. Identical. That was the first thing she noticed. Same sharp jawline. Same dark eyes that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. Same black hair, one swept back, one falling forward across his forehead. The only difference was the way they moved. One was controlled, deliberate, every step measured. The other was fluid, almost lazy, like he had all the time in the world and didn't care who was watching. They wore matching dark coats, expensive, the kind that whispered old money, and they were looking at her. Not at the menu, not at the bottles behind her. At her. Zuri's hand tightened around the cloth she was holding. Something shifted in her chest, something she couldn't name, like a lock turning inside a door she didn't know existed. The controlled one spoke first. Something in Korean, smooth and low, directed at Munbi, who was sitting behind the counter half asleep. The old man's eyes flew open. He sat up so fast his stool scraped against the floor, his face drained of color. Choi SSI, he stammered, bowing immediately. Of course, of course. He gestured wildly toward the back booth, the private one Zuri had never seen anyone use. The 2 men didn't bow back. They didn't need to. They moved to the booth like it had always been theirs, like the whole bar had been built around it. The fluid one paused as he passed the bar. His eyes dropped to Zuri's hands, still white-knuckled around the cloth, then traveled up to her face. Something flickered in his expression, not surprise, recognition, like he'd been waiting to see her and she'd finally shown up. Then he smiled, slow, devastating, and walked away without saying a word. Zuri's heart was hammering. She turned to Munbi. Who are they? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The old man looked at her like she just asked him to explain gravity. Choi Tae-yoon and Choi Junwoo. He said the names quietly, like saying them too loud might summon something. The twins, Seoul's most feared men, heirs to the Choi syndicate. They don't come here, he added, glancing toward the booth with something close to terror. They don't come anywhere like here. So why tonight? Zuri asked. Munbi didn't answer. He just shook his head and disappeared into the back. Zuri stood alone behind the bar, the cloth forgotten in her hand, and for the first time in 4 months she didn't feel invisible. Before we find out what happens next, drop a comment right now telling me, are you Team Tae-yoon or Team Junwoo? And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button and turn on notifications. We post these addictive stories every single week. Now, back to Zuri and the twins. The next morning, Zuri couldn't stop thinking about them. She'd spent the rest of her shift pretending she wasn't aware of every sound coming from that back booth. The murmur of Korean she couldn't quite catch. The occasional laugh, low and identical, like stereo sound coming from 2 speakers. When they finally left around 1 a.m., neither of them looked at her again. The fluid one, Junwoo, she'd learned later, had left a stack of bills on the table that would have covered her rent for 3 months. She almost didn't take it. Almost. But rent was rent, and pride only went so far when the landlord knocked. By afternoon, she'd pushed them out of her mind, or tried to. She was walking back from the market, groceries in one arm, hood up against the drizzle when she saw the black car, parked across the street from her building. Engine off, tinted windows. It hadn't been there that morning. Zuri slowed her steps. Her skin prickled with something old and familiar. She'd felt this before, back in Atlanta, before everything fell apart. The feeling of being watched. She kept walking, didn't look at the car again. But her heart didn't slow down until she was inside her apartment with the door locked. That evening, she texted Munby. "Is there anything I should know about those men from last night?" The response came fast. "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. Delete this message." She stared at her phone for a long time. Then she deleted it. The Choi twins had built their empire the way most people built walls. Quietly, deliberately, one brick at a time, until nobody could get over it, through it, or around it. Choi Tae-yoon was the older brother by 4 minutes. He ran the legitimate side, the real estate empire, the investment firms, the properties that stretched across Seoul like a web. He sat in boardrooms with men twice his age and made them feel small without ever raising his voice. He was the face the world saw, polished, composed. Lethal in a suit, Choi Junwoo was 4 minutes younger and twice as dangerous. He didn't sit in boardrooms. He moved through the underworld the way water moved through cracks, finding every weakness, every pressure point, every door that no one else could open. He smiled more than his brother, laughed more, touched more. But people who mistook that warmth for softness didn't get a second chance to correct the mistake. They'd been inseparable their entire lives, not just brothers, something deeper. Something almost telepathic, the way they finished each other's thoughts, the way one could read the other's expression from across a room. They shared everything. Power, territory, enemies. Women, occasionally, had tried to come between them. None had lasted, not because the twins were cruel, but because they were complete. Two halves of something whole. Until the night they walked into Munby's bar and saw Zuri Cole standing behind the counter with rain still in her hair and gold-brown skin that caught the light like something precious and impossible. And for the first time in their lives, they both felt the same thing at the same time. Want. The kind that didn't ask permission. A few days later, Tae-yoon was in his office at the Choi Tower, 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Seoul's skyline like a painting he owned. His phone buzzed, a text from his brother. One word, her. Tae-yoon didn't need context. He'd felt it too, that night at the bar, the way his chest had tightened when she looked up, the way his brother had paused, smiled, lingered. He'd watched Junwoo's face in that moment and seen something he'd never seen before, hunger that wasn't about power. He pulled up the file his security team had already compiled. Zuri Cole, 26, American, originally from Atlanta. Came to Seoul 4 months ago. No family listed in the country. Previous address in Atlanta flagged, police reports from 2 years back, a restraining order, a name that Tae-yoon recognized immediately. Marcus Wade. Atlanta's mid-level crime boss, the kind of man who thought small territory meant small consequences. The restraining order had been filed and violated 6 times before Zuri disappeared from the country entirely. Tae-yoon set down his phone. Marcus Wade was going to become a very short conversation. He picked up another phone, the one that wasn't connected to anything legitimate. Junwoo's voice answered on the first ring. "I saw the file," his brother said before he could speak. Marcus Wade. Tae-yoon's jaw tightened. "He knows where she is. Not yet, but men like him always find out eventually." Silence. Then Junwoo, quieter now, something raw underneath the calm. "We're not letting that happen." It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. And both of them knew it. The first sign that something had shifted in the twins' world came 3 days after the bar. Zuri was closing up at Munby's when she noticed the man in the corner. Not one of the regulars. Young, Korean, clean-cut, wearing a jacket that was too expensive for this neighborhood. He'd been nursing the same glass of soju for 2 hours. Every time she glanced up, his eyes were on her. Not the way men usually looked at her. Assessing, cataloging, like she was an assignment. Her stomach dropped. She pulled out her phone and texted Munby, who was in the back, "Someone's watching me." The old man appeared in the doorway, took one look at the man in the corner, and his face went white. "That's not random," he said under his breath. He turned to the man. "Choi SSI sent you." The man didn't deny it. Just nodded once, stood, and left without finishing his drink. Munby turned back to Zuri. His expression was strange, not fear, something closer to relief. "They're watching you, both of them." Zuri's arms prickled. "Watching me, why? Because someone is coming for you, and they want to make sure he doesn't get here first." The words landed like ice water. Zuri's first thought was Marcus. Her second was panic. Her third, the one that surprised her, was something dangerously close to feeling safe. She hated herself for it. The following week, Zuri started noticing the pattern. A black car that materialized whenever she left her apartment and disappeared when she arrived somewhere. A coffee left outside her door every morning, still warm, no note, just a single white camellia tucked under the cup. Once, when she was walking home late and a man she didn't recognize fell into step behind her on a dark street, he was gone by the time she turned the corner. Not gone, she realized later. Removed. She found out how when she ran into the man at the convenience store the next day, sitting on the curb outside with a split lip and bruised knuckles, looking at his phone like it had personally offended him. The twins were watching her, protecting her, without ever showing their faces. And she couldn't decide if it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done or the most terrifying. If you're already hooked, hit that like button. I want to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment right now. And trust me, what's coming next is going to destroy you. Taeyoon and Junwoo met in the penthouse that night. Their shared space, neutral ground, the one place that belonged to both of them equally. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of Seoul that made the city look like it was laid out for their inspection. Taeyoon sat in the leather chair by the window, one leg crossed, whiskey in hand, untouched. Junwoo stood at the bar, pouring his own but not drinking either. They were thinking the same thing. About the same woman. This is new, Taeyoon said finally. Junwoo glanced at him. Which part? The part where we're both thinking about the same person and neither of us wants to let the other have her. Silence. Junwoo set down the bottle. In their world, sharing wasn't unusual. Power was shared. Territory was shared. But this wasn't power or territory. This was something neither of them had a name for yet. I'm not going to pretend I don't want her, Taeyoon said. Neither am I, Junwoo replied. So what do we do? Taeyoon's eyes were steady. We don't make her choose. Junwoo raised an eyebrow. She'll have to eventually. No. Taeyoon turned back to the window. She doesn't, because we're not going to make this about us. We're going to make it about her. The words hung between them, heavy, final, a decision that would change everything, and neither of them looked away first. The next encounter happened by design, though Zuri didn't know it. She was at a coffee shop in Gangnam, a small place she'd started coming to on her mornings off. Quiet, warm, the kind of place where nobody bothered you. She was reading, her phone propped against the sugar dispenser, when a voice behind her said, "You have coffee on your chin." She touched her face instinctively. Nothing there. She turned. Junwoo stood behind her, that same slow smile from the bar, the one that made her stomach flip and her guard go up at the exact same time. He held up his phone, angled so she could see the screen, a photo he'd just taken. Her mid-sip, a tiny drop of foam on her chin that she hadn't felt. She stared at the photo, then at him. "You were taking pictures of me." Her voice came out sharp. He didn't flinch. "I was making sure you were okay. That's not the same thing as taking pictures." He pocketed the phone. "May I sit?" She should have said no. Every instinct she had, the ones that had kept her alive through Marcus Wade and everything that came after, screamed at her to leave. Instead, she heard herself say, "Fine. But if you take another photo, I'm breaking your phone." Junwoo's smile widened. There she is. They talked for an hour. He didn't ask about Marcus, didn't push for information she wasn't ready to give. He asked about Atlanta, the good parts, the food, the music, the way the autumn light hit the Georgia countryside. He asked about her work, her interests, what she wanted her life to look like when she stopped running. She caught herself answering honestly, more honestly than she had with anyone in months. When she asked him about himself, he deflected with humor, asked another question about her instead. Redirected so smoothly she didn't notice until after he'd left. At the door, he paused. "Same time tomorrow?" She narrowed her eyes. "Is that a request or a command?" He tilted his head. "Consider it an invitation." Then he was gone, and Zuri sat alone in the coffee shop with her heart beating faster than it had any right to, wondering when exactly she'd started wanting to say yes. The thing about the Choi twins that nobody outside their circle understood was how they operated together. It wasn't a hierarchy. It wasn't one leading and one following. It was seamless, like breathing. One inhale, one exhale, one body. Junwoo was the one who drew her in. Warm, funny, disarming. The one who made her laugh and forget, for minutes at a time, that she was scared of everything. Taeyoon was the one who made sure the world stayed back. He was the wall she didn't see. The threat that kept every threat at a distance. She met him properly 2 weeks after Junwoo's coffee shop visit. It wasn't an accident. She was at the bar again, closing up, when the door opened and Taeyoon walked in alone. No coat this time. Dark sweater, sleeves pushed up, hair slightly damp from the rain. He looked different without his brother beside him. Softer, more present, like he'd stepped out of one version of himself and into another. He sat at the bar without speaking, waited. Zuri studied him for a long moment. "You're the other one," she said. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Taeyoon." "And you're Zuri." She hadn't told either of them her name. They already knew. The realization didn't surprise her anymore. What surprised her was that it didn't scare her. Not as much as it should have. He ordered soju. She poured it. Their fingers touched when she slid the glass across the bar, and something passed between them, electric, quiet, deliberate. Not an accident. Neither of them moved away. When he left that night, he didn't say goodbye. He just looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes, and walked out into the rain. Zuri pressed her palm flat against the bar where his glass had been. It was still warm, and for the first time since coming to Seoul, she didn't feel alone. The danger found her on a Thursday. She was walking home from the market, groceries in one arm, phone in the other, when a man stepped out from the alley beside her building. American, late 30s. Expensive jacket, wrong shoes for Seoul's streets. He was looking at her the way Marcus used to look at things he wanted to own. "You're hard to find," he said. His accent was southern, Atlanta drawl thick even after what must have been months of being overseas. Zuri's blood went cold. She didn't run. Running was what Marcus had trained her to do. It was what he expected. Instead, she turned to face him fully. "Who sent you?" The man smiled, like it was a game, like she was already lost. Marcus says hello. He took a step forward, then he stopped, not because of anything Zuri did, because two shadows detached themselves from the darkness at the end of the alley, one on each side, moving in perfect sync. Taeyoon and Junwoo, side by side, identical faces wearing identical expressions of absolute cold fury. The man from Atlanta looked between them. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes, not confidence. Fear. Taeyoon spoke first. His voice was quiet, calm. The kind of calm that Zuri was starting to recognize as the most dangerous sound in the world. "You have 5 seconds to disappear." The man opened his mouth. Junwoo moved, fast. Not violent, not yet, just fast, closing the distance between them in 2 steps, positioning himself directly in front of Zuri like a wall made of intention. His smile was gone. His face was stone. 3 seconds, he said. The man ran. Zuri stood in the alley, heart hammering, groceries still in her arms, staring at the 2 men who had just materialized out of the dark to protect her. Neither of them looked at each other. They were both looking at her, making sure she was okay, making sure she was breathing, making sure she was still standing. She was, barely. She looked at Taeyoon first, then at Junwoo, then back at Taeyoon. "Both of you," she said, her voice shaking, "are you following me everywhere?" Taeyoon didn't deny it. Junwoo just looked at her with those dark eyes and said, "Would you have preferred we weren't here tonight?" The question hung in the rain between them. And Zuri, who had spent 2 years running from men who wanted to control her, looked at 2 men who had just thrown themselves between her and danger without being asked, without expecting anything, without even wanting credit. And she whispered, "No, I wouldn't have." That night, they took her to the penthouse. Not their shared space, this was different. A safe house, they called it. Clean, quiet, stocked with everything she might need. A bed with clean white sheets. A kitchen with food already in the refrigerator. Things she hadn't asked for, hadn't expected, but somehow needed exactly. Taeyoon handled the security briefing. The man from Atlanta had been identified, Marcus Wade's enforcer, which meant Marcus knew where she was, which meant the situation had just become considerably more complicated. Junwoo handled Zuri. He sat across from her on the couch, close enough to be present, far enough to give her space, and just talked. Not about danger, not about Marcus, about Seoul, about the rain, about a restaurant he'd been meaning to try that made the best sunjubu jjiggy in the city. He talked until her hands stopped shaking, until her breathing evened out, until she looked at him and saw, beneath the charm and the confidence and the dangerous beauty, a man who was genuinely afraid for her. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. He met her eyes. "Yes, we do." And that was the end of that conversation. That night, alone in the safe house, Zuri lay in the dark and thought about what had happened. 2 men, 2 faces. One moment where both of them had stepped forward at exactly the same time, like it was choreographed, like they'd rehearsed it, like protecting her was something they'd already decided to do before she'd even known she needed protecting. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her own heartbeat. Something was happening. Something she couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't run from. For once in her life, she didn't want to. The days that followed were the closest thing to peace Zuri had felt in 2 years. She stayed at the safe house. The twins made sure she had everything she needed without ever making it feel like a cage. Groceries appeared every morning. Fresh flowers on the kitchen counter, white camellias again, no note. A new phone, untraceable, set up with her contacts already saved. Junwoo visited every afternoon. He'd sit on the couch, shoes off, legs stretched out, and talk her through the day like it was the most natural thing in the world. He brought her Korean street food wrapped in paper, told her stories about Seoul that made her laugh until her stomach ached. He never pushed, never asked for more than she was ready to give. But every time he left, he lingered at the door a second too long. And every time, Zuri noticed. Taeyoon came at night, always after dark. He'd sit in the kitchen with a glass of water he never touched and go over security updates. Calm, precise, professional. But once when she walked in on him mid-call, she caught the way his eyes moved over her. Not assessing, not calculating, hungry. The moment he realized she'd seen it, his expression smoothed back into control, like a mask sliding back into place. But the hunger had been real. She felt it in the air between them for the rest of the night. If you are not already screaming in the comments, what are you doing? Drop a comment right now. Team Taeyoon or Team Junwoo? Because this is only the beginning. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single second of what's coming. Now, back to Zuri and the twins. The jealousy showed up before anyone expected it. It started with a man named Daniel Park. Korean-American, early 30s, worked at a cafe near the safe house that Zuri had started visiting on her walks. He was warm, easy, the kind of man who smiled like the sun was coming out and made you believe the world wasn't so dark after all. He noticed her on the third visit, brought her a latte she hadn't ordered, said he'd guessed her order wrong on purpose just to have an excuse to talk to her. She laughed, actually laughed. The kind of laugh that loosened something in her chest that had been wound tight for months. By the end of the week, Daniel had become a regular fixture in her afternoons. He didn't know about the twins, didn't know about Marcus, didn't know about any of it. He just knew a beautiful woman who smiled like she was relearning how, and he wanted to be the reason she kept doing it. Zuri knew it was harmless. She knew Daniel was just a kind man being kind. But the way Junwoo's jaw tightened when she mentioned the cafe, the way Taeyoon's eyes went flat and cold when his security team reported that a man had been walking her to the door. They both knew, and neither of them said a word about it, which made it worse. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. Zuri had invited Daniel to dinner at a small restaurant near Hanam. Nothing romantic, she told herself, just company. Just normal human interaction that didn't involve danger or bodyguards or two identical pairs of dark eyes watching her from the shadows. They were sitting at a corner table, Daniel telling her about his grandmother's recipe for something she couldn't pronounce, when the door opened. Junwoo walked in, not looking for her. That was the lie. He was scanning the room with the casual precision of someone who already knew exactly where she was sitting and had walked in anyway. His eyes found Daniel first. Stayed there, something shifted in his expression. Not anger, worse, something quiet and dangerous and absolutely still. Then his gaze moved to Zuri. She watched his face in that moment and saw everything he was trying not to feel. The want, the fear, the fury that he had no right to feel and felt anyway. He nodded once. Barely. A greeting, an acknowledgement. Then he turned and left without a word. The entire thing lasted 12 seconds. Daniel hadn't even noticed. But Zuri's heart was hammering so hard she couldn't taste her food. That night, she sat in the safe house and stared at the ceiling for an hour. Then she pulled out her phone and texted Junwoo. "Why did you come tonight?" The response took 3 minutes. Routine check. She stared at the words, then typed back, "You're a terrible liar." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Yes, I am," that was all, but it was enough. Taeyoon found out about Daniel the same way he found out about everything. His people told him. The report was clinical. Zuri Cole, accompanied by male subject Daniel Park, restaurant in Hanam, duration of visit approximately 90 minutes. Physical contact observed, hand on forearm, casual, nothing significant. Taeyoon read the report 3 times. Then he closed his laptop and sat in absolute stillness for 10 full minutes, staring at nothing, his jaw so tight the muscle there twitched. He didn't call his brother. He didn't need to. He already knew Junwoo had seen it. Already knew his brother was feeling the same thing. The same quiet, devastating, completely irrational need to put himself between Zuri and anyone else in the world. They met that night in the penthouse. Same as always. Whiskey neither of them drank. City spread out below them like a promise. Taeyoon spoke first. "We need to talk about what this is." Junwoo didn't pretend to misunderstand. "We already know what it is. That's not the problem. Then what is?" Junwoo turned to face him. "The problem is she doesn't know it's possible. To have both of us, to choose both of us. And we can't ask her to choose one without destroying the other." Silence stretched between them. The kind of silence that only existed between people who had shared a mind their entire lives. Then Taeyoon said, quietly, "So we don't ask her to choose. We show her she doesn't have to." It was the same conclusion they'd reached before, but it landed differently now. Heavier, more real. Because now there was a man named Daniel Park who smiled at her like she deserved the world. And both of them had to reckon with the fact that the only way to win her wasn't to fight for her. It was to become someone worth choosing. The confession didn't happen all at once. It happened in pieces. Small, devastating, impossible to ignore pieces. Taeyoon left a note in her jacket pocket one morning. Not a love letter, just 3 words. You looked happy. And beneath it, in smaller writing, that matters more than anything. Zuri read it standing in the kitchen, coffee going cold in her hand. She read it 4 times. Then she pressed it against her chest and closed her eyes and breathed. Junwoo's confession came differently. He was teaching her to cook. Sunjubu jjigi, the dish he'd talked about at the safe house that first night. They were standing side by side in the kitchen, his hands guiding hers as she stirred the pot, his chest close to her back. His voice low and warm as he explained the timing. And then he stopped talking, just stopped. His hand stayed over hers on the wooden spoon. His breath was warm against her temple. And in the silence, Zuri felt something shift between them. Something that had been building for weeks, pressing against the walls, looking for a crack. She turned her head. He was right there, inches away. His dark eyes searching her face like she was the only thing in the world worth reading. "You're starring," she whispered. He didn't look away. I can't help it. The moment held, breathless, suspended. Then Zuri turned back to the stove and neither of them spoke for a long time, but his hand stayed over hers, and she didn't pull away. The jealousy broke open properly 2 days later. Zuri had gone to see Daniel again. Coffee this time, not dinner, something lighter, something that felt safe and uncomplicated and normal. She needed normal. She needed to remember what it felt like to be a regular person with regular feelings instead of a woman caught in the orbit of 2 men who could level entire cities without breaking a sweat. Daniel was easy. He asked about her day. He listened. He didn't make her feel like she was drowning. They were walking back along the Han River, the late afternoon light turning everything gold when Daniel reached for her hand. It was gentle, tentative, a question, not a demand. And Zuri, starving for gentleness, let him take it. She didn't see Ti-yoon. He was across the river on the pedestrian bridge, standing perfectly still in a black coat, watching. His phone was in his hand. His knuckles were white around it. Junwoo was beside him. Neither of them spoke. They both watched Daniel's thumb trace a slow circle on the back of Zuri's hand, and something broke in both of their chests at exactly the same time. That evening, the confrontation happened. Zuri walked into the penthouse to find both of them there. Not the safe house. The penthouse, their space, their territory. They were standing on opposite sides of the room, a deliberate distance between them, and the air felt like it was vibrating. Ti-yoon was by the window, arms crossed, jaw locked, not looking at her, looking at the city. Like if he looked at her directly, he might say something he couldn't take back. Junwoo was leaning against the bar, hands in his pockets. Expression carefully, dangerously neutral. Zuri walked in and immediately felt the temperature drop. "What happened?" she asked. Nobody answered. The silence stretched until it became its own kind of pressure. Then Ti-yoon turned. His voice was controlled, measured. Every word placed exactly where it needed to be. "We saw you today." Zuri's stomach dropped. On the river, with him, the name wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. Zuri looked between them. Both of their faces were unreadable. Both of them radiating something raw and barely contained. "You were watching me," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Yes." Junwoo finally pushed off the bar. He moved closer, not all the way, just enough to close the distance by half. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, almost, "We don't have a right to be angry, we know that." Ti-yoon's jaw tightened. "But we are." The admission hung in the air between all 3 of them. Honest, painful, true. Zuri's chest ached. She looked at Ti-yoon, at the way his hands had curled into fists at his sides, the way his body was coiled with a tension she'd never seen in him before. Then she looked at Junwoo, at the way his smile was completely gone, replaced by something open and vulnerable and terrified. 2 men, the same face, the same impossible, aching want. And she was standing in the middle of it, realizing that she wanted them both just as badly. "I'm not yours," she said quietly. "Not as a rejection. As a fact. I'm not a thing to be owned or fought over." Both of them flinched. Ti-yoon closed his eyes briefly. "We're not trying to own you." His voice cracked, just a fraction, enough to hear. "We're trying to figure out how to breathe when you're in the same room as someone else." Junwoo stepped forward, one more step. His hand came up slowly, palm open, not reaching for her, just offering. "We're not asking you to choose," he said. "We're asking you to know that we're here, both of us, completely." Zuri looked at his open hand. Then at Ti-yoon, who had finally turned to face her fully, and in his eyes she saw it, the thing she'd been too afraid to name. Not possession. Devotion. The desperate, aching kind that didn't ask for anything in return. She reached out and took Junwoo's hand. Then she turned to Ti-yoon and extended her other hand. He crossed the space between them in 2 steps. His fingers closed around hers like he was afraid she might disappear. The 3 of them stood there, connected, breathing the same air, and something settled into place. Not a solution, not an answer, but a beginning. The kiss happened that night, not planned, not choreographed. It just happened the way storms happened, the way earthquakes happened, the way 2 years of fear and loneliness and desperate wanting finally found a crack in the wall and poured through it. They were on the couch, all three of them, Zuri in the middle, Taeyoon on one side, Junwoo on the other. Someone had put music on, something low and warm that filled the silence without demanding attention. Junwoo's arm was around her shoulders. Taeyoon's hand rested on her knee, warm through the fabric of her jeans. They were talking about nothing. About the weather. About a movie Junwoo wanted to see. About whether Taeyoon's terrible taste in restaurants was genetic or a personal choice. And then Junwoo turned to say something, and Zuri turned at the same time, and they were suddenly close enough that she could feel his breath on her lips. Everything stopped. The music, the talking, the breathing. Junwoo's eyes dropped to her mouth, stayed there. Then he kissed her, soft at first, a question, then deeper when she answered it. Her hand came up to his jaw, and she felt him exhale like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. When they pulled apart, Taeyoon was watching, not with anger, not with jealousy. With something that looked like relief. Like he'd been waiting for this moment, hopping for it, and now that it was here, he could finally breathe too. Zuri turned to him. She didn't have to say anything. She just leaned in, and he met her halfway, and the kiss was different. Slower, deeper. Taeyoon kissed like he did everything else completely, with absolute focus, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Like she was the thing he'd been searching for his entire life and had finally found. When she pulled back, both of them were looking at her. And Zuri, for the first time in 2 years, felt something she thought Marcus had killed forever. She felt whole. The room was dark. The city hummed below. And the three of them held each other in the quiet, not needing words, not needing promises. Just needing this, just needing each other. What happened next stayed between them. Zuri would remember the warmth of it. The way Taeyoon's hand traced the line of her shoulder like she was something sacred. The way Junwoo whispered her name against her skin like a prayer. The way the fear she'd been carrying for 2 years dissolved, piece by piece, in the space between the two of them. By morning, everything had changed. None of them regretted a single second. The morning after, Zuri woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee and 2 sets of arms that didn't want to let go. She lay there for a long time, eyes closed, listening to them breathe. One on each side. Warm, safe, real. Then her phone buzzed. The one Taeyoon had given her. Unknown number. She opened it slowly. One line, "I know where you are," 3 words, that was all. But they turned the warmth in her chest to ice. She sat up. The twins were already awake. Taeyoon was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, reading the same message from a different angle. His face was granite. Junwoo stood at the window, looking out at the city, his jaw tight. "Marcus," Zuri said. It wasn't a question. Taeyoon looked at her. His expression was calm. The kind of calm that meant something was about to happen that no one could stop. Yes, the next 48 hours were a war of preparation. Taeyoon mobilized every resource the Choi Syndicate had. Security doubled. Safe houses changed. Communications encrypted. The penthouse became a command center, screens showing feeds from every camera in a 5-block radius around Zuri's last known movements. Junwoo handled the intelligence. His network was vast, built over years of moving through Seoul's underworld like a ghost. By nightfall, he had everything. Marcus Wade had flown in from Atlanta 3 days ago. He wasn't alone. 6 men, 2 of them former military. He had money, connections, and the kind of obsessive, single-minded determination that made him genuinely dangerous. He wasn't just coming for Zuri. He was coming to prove that no one, not even Seoul's most powerful family, could keep her from him. Zuri listened to the briefing sitting between the twins at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she couldn't taste. The fear was back. She could feel it settling into her bones like cold water. But it was different this time. Different because she wasn't alone. Different because the 2 men sitting on either side of her weren't going to let Marcus touch her. Not even close. "We move tonight," Taeyoon said, "before he has time to set up." Junwoo nodded. "We know where he's staying. We know his schedule. We end this before it starts." Zuri looked at both of them. "Please," she said quietly. "Don't do anything you can't come back from." They looked at each other. A whole conversation passing between them in a single glance. The kind of thing only they could do. Then Taeyoon turned back to her. His voice was soft, almost tender. "We're coming back to you, Zuri, both of us. That's not negotiable." She believed him. That was the terrifying part. She believed him completely. They left at midnight. Zuri stayed at the penthouse with a full security detail, 4 men, all armed, all reporting directly to Taeyoon. She sat in the dark living room and watched Seoul glitter below her and tried not to think about what was happening in the shadows. The twins moved like water. Junwoo led the approach. His people knew the hotel inside out, staff who owed him favors, security cameras he could loop, doors he could unlock with a phone call. Ti-yoon handled the confrontation. He walked into Marcus Wade's hotel suite at 1:17 a.m. like he owned it, because in Seoul, he essentially did. Marcus was sitting in the living area, jacket off, whiskey in hand, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when Ti-yoon entered. Didn't flinch. Didn't stand. Men like Marcus had spent their lives being the most dangerous person in every room they walked into. It was a habit that Seoul was about to break. "You must be one of the twins," Marcus said. His southern accent was thick, lazy, confident. Ti-yoon didn't answer. He just stood in the doorway and looked at Marcus the way a man looks at something he's already decided to destroy. Behind him, Junwoo appeared in the hallway. Same face, same expression. Marcus's eyes moved between them. For the first time, something flickered, not quite fear, awareness. The realization that he was no longer the most dangerous person in the room, not even close. Ti-yoon spoke. His voice was quiet, controlled. Every word precise. "You came to Seoul for Zuri Cole." Marcus didn't deny it. "She's mine," he said. "She's been mine for 3 years." Junwoo stepped forward. His tone was almost conversational, almost friendly. The kind of friendly that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. "She was never yours, and you're going to leave Seoul tonight." "Tonight," Marcus repeated. He laughed, a short, dry sound. "And if I don't?" Ti-yoon moved, not fast, not dramatically, just one step forward, closing the distance. His eyes never left Marcus's face. "Then you won't leave at all." The room went absolutely still. Marcus looked at Ti-yoon, then at Junwoo, then back at Ti-yoon. And in that moment, something shifted behind his eyes. The calculation of a man who had spent his entire career reading rooms, reading danger, reading the line between survivable and unsurvivable. He just found it. By 2 a.m., Marcus Wade was on a plane back to Atlanta. His passport had been flagged by people he'd never heard of. His bank accounts had been frozen by systems he didn't know existed. And a very clear message had been delivered through channels that would never be traced back to anyone. Come back to Seoul, and there would be nothing left of him to come back with. The twins returned to the penthouse as dawn broke. Zuri was still awake. She'd been sitting in the dark for hours, knees pulled to her chest, watching the door. When it opened and they walked in, she was on her feet before she consciously decided to move. Ti-yoon caught her first, his arms wrapped around her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she didn't care. She pressed her face into his neck and felt the tension drain out of him like water through sand. "It's done," he said. His voice was rough, broken open in a way she'd never heard from him. "He's gone." Junwoo's arms came around both of them a second later, gentler, slower, but just as desperate. His chin rested on top of her head, his hand on the small of her back, holding her against him and against his brother. The three of them stood there, tangled together in the gray morning light, and breathed. "It's really over," Zuri whispered against Ti-yoon's chest. "Really over." Junwoo pressed his lips to her temple. "He's never coming back." She pulled back just enough to look at both of them. Their faces, identical and different all at once, exhausted, relieved, looking at her like she was the reason the sun was rising. "I love you," she said. The words came out before she could stop them, before she could think about whether it was too fast or too much or too complicated. She looked at Ti-yoon. "I love you," then at Junwoo. "Both of you. I love you both." Ti-yoon's face crumpled, just for a second. Mask he wore for the world, the cold control, the untouchable power, it shattered completely. And beneath it was a man who had been waiting his entire life to hear those words from someone who meant them. Junwoo just smiled, the real one, the one that reached his eyes and made him look younger and softer and so devastatingly beautiful it hurt. "We love you too," he said simply. "Both of us. Always." Ti-yoon cupped her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. "You changed everything," he said. "From the moment we saw you." Junwoo took her hand and pressed it to his chest. "Feel that?" She could feel his heartbeat. Steady, strong, hers. "It's been yours since that night at the bar," he said. "Both of ours." She laughed then. A wet, broken, beautiful laugh that filled the penthouse and echoed off the windows and made the city outside feel smaller and less important than this moment. This exact, impossible, extraordinary moment. 3 months later, Seoul in spring was a different city. Warmer. Softer. The kind of light that made everything look like it had been painted by someone who believed in second chances. Zuri was standing in the kitchen of the penthouse, the one that had become home, making breakfast for 3. The twins were sprawled across the living room in that way they had, Ti-yoon at the desk reviewing something on his laptop, Junwoo on the couch with his legs up, reading a book he'd never admit was a romance novel. It was ordinary. It was domestic. It was the most extraordinary thing Zuri had ever lived. She was cracking eggs into a bowl when the nausea hit. Sudden, violent. She gripped the counter and breathed through it, pressing her forehead against the cool marble. The eggs sat unfinished. The room tilted sideways. Zuri Junwoo's voice immediately alert. He was off the couch and beside her in seconds. His hand on her back, steady, warm. What's wrong? She shook her head. I'm fine. I just feel sick. It had been happening for a week. Small waves of it, usually in the mornings, gone by noon. She'd been chalking it up to stress, to the tail end of everything with Marcus, to her body finally processing 2 years of fear and running. But now, standing in the kitchen with Junwoo's hand on her back and Taeyoon crossing the room toward her with that look on his face, the one that meant he'd already figured something out, a different possibility landed. Softly, quietly, like a camellia falling from a branch. Taeyoon reached them. His eyes moved over her face, then dropped to her stomach, then back up to her eyes. His expression didn't change, but something in it opened. Something ancient and fierce and tender all at once. When was your last period? He asked. His voice was impossibly gentle. Zuri stared at him, then the math clicked into place. Her hands went to her stomach, the same way they always did when something important was happening, something shifting, something new. Oh, she whispered. Junwoo looked between them. His eyes widened. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Zuri pressed her hand flat against her stomach. I think so. The silence that followed was the loudest thing that had ever happened in that penthouse. Then Taeyoon did something Zuri had never seen him do. He dropped to his knees. Right there on the kitchen floor in front of both of them, this man who commanded armies and made grown men tremble. He dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead gently against her stomach. His hands came up to rest on either side of her waist, holding her, holding the possibility, holding everything they might become. Junwoo knelt beside his brother a second later. His hand covered Taeyoon's on her waist. His smile was wide and shaking and absolutely, devastatingly happy. Both of them kneeling in the kitchen, looking up at her like she'd just handed them the world. She had. The test confirmed it 2 hours later. Positive. Zuri sat on the bathroom counter with the plastic stick in her hand, staring at the 2 pink lines, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the future. She was running toward it. The twins found her there. They didn't say anything at first. Taeyoon leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with that look he had, the one that was all warmth and no armor. Junwoo sat beside her on the counter, close enough that their shoulders touched. He glanced at the test, then at her. Then back at the test. Well, he said, his voice thick with something he was trying very hard to hide, I guess we're doing this. Taeyoon pushed off the doorframe, crossed the room, took the test gently from her hand and looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at her. Something broke open in his expression, not sadness, not fear. Joy, pure, unguarded, terrified joy. Both of us, he said quietly. This baby is both of us, it's all of us. Zuri reached for his hand, then for Junwoo's. The 3 of them, connected, standing in a bathroom in a penthouse in Seoul, holding the beginning of something that none of them had dared to dream was possible. That evening, the penthouse was quiet. Dinner had been cooked and eaten and cleaned up. The city was settling into darkness outside the windows. Zuri was curled on the couch, feet tucked under her, a blanket over her lap. Taeyoon was beside her, one arm around her shoulders, his thumb tracing slow circles on her arm. Junwoo was on her other side, his hand resting on her stomach, palm flat, like he was already listening for something. They didn't need to talk. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything they'd survived together, everything they'd chosen, everything they were becoming. Seoul glittered below. The twins' empire stretched across the city like a web of power and protection and promise. And in the middle of all of it, a woman who had come to this country with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart was about to become a mother. 2 fathers, 1 family, built from the wreckage of fear and the bravery of choosing each other anyway. Zuri looked at Taeyoon, then at Junwoo, then at the city outside. The rain had started again. Seoul's constant, relentless rain, the kind that washed everything clean if you let it. She smiled. And for the first time, the rain didn't feel like something to run from. It felt like home. And that's the end of Zuri, Taeyoon, and Junwoo's story. Let me know in the comments what your favorite moment was. Was it the kitchen confession? The river scene? The way both of them dropped to their knees when they found out about the baby? I want to hear everything. If this story lived in your chest the way it lived in mine, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next story. We are building something special here, and every single one of you is part of it. If you want more Afro-Korean romance, check out our playlist in the description. The link is right there. And besties, if you loved these twins, comment right now and tell me. Should I do a part 2? Because I have ideas. I have so many ideas. We are at 1,000 subscribers strong and we are not stopping. Every like, every share, every comment helps us keep creating stories like this one. Stories about love that doesn't fit the mold. Stories about people choosing each other even when the world says they shouldn't. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. I'll see you in the next one.